You got all that? Good, let's rock. Characters don't exist in a vacuum. What do I mean by this? Characters are the main vehicle for which the audience experiences your story and immerses into it. They are the vessels the audience identifies with, the vectors for which the themes and events are expressed. The bulk of most stories is spent with them interacting with each other, whether it be through a main and side character, side and side, main and background, you name it. In an ensemble cast especially, the way one character is written tends to affect another. Who you focus on also means who you don't, and relationships are built and presented through the interactions we see on screen above all else. A consistent character can be elevated or undermined by their interactions with others. A character with a supposedly major development can be hard to get invested in when the story chooses to focus on everyone else. A character who is overpowered and consistently active can rob focus away from others who need time to shine. A villain can be more or less threatening depending on how competent the heroes they put pressure on are. These entities do not exist in isolation. They don't exist in a vacuum. Let's start with some battle shonen anime. For as much as I hate Kimetsu no Yaiba or Demon Slayer, I don't have much against its main lead. In fact, Tanjirou has a lot of qualities I love in main characters like, say, Takashi Natsume from Natsume Yujincho, or the character I'm going to be comparing this guy to. He's kind, compassionate, and empathetic to the point where he impacts friends and allies, and brings solace to both some of them and even some of his enemies. He's tenacious, hardworking, ride or die for the people around him, and steadfast in his morals against enemies and allies alike. He also feels a deep sense of guilt and regret for failing to save his family, as explored in the Mugen Train arc. He's also relatively consistent as a personality. So with all that in mind, he sounds like a great main character, one I would hold in high regard. So why am I so on him? Well, I can tell you one major reason. The side cast is terribly underwritten, and he has no strong dynamics or chemistry with any of them. Sure, we get to know how much he cares for his sister Nezuko. Even after his family was killed and she got turned into a demon, he still risked everything to save and pacify her so they could travel together, get stronger, and look for a cure. However, even outside of her inability to speak, we hardly get to see anything from her perspective. She rarely tries to communicate in the earlier arcs, usually sleeping in a box while Tanjirou goes on about how much she means to him. This bond is informed through battles with other demons, through the premiere, and through his journey to cure her, but it's not informed through everyday interactions. They don't really have any beyond him tending to his sister like a battle pet, because that's what she is. A player 2 Swiss Army knife with barely any personality beyond being nice and obedient, outside of that one time she got angry at a Hashira for trying to bait her into attacking him after brutalizing Tanjiro so that he and his forces could kill the both of them. Oh, and their first major moment since the first episode is an asshole so emotionally manipulative that I damn near dropped the series at that point. The other two companions don't fare much better. Zenitsu makes me want to down ibuprofen bottles. 75% of his dialogue is just him screaming and crying about how scared he is, or about wanting a woman before he dies, or about being a simp for Nezuko. That is his main contribution outside of popping off in fights sometimes. There is nothing interesting or funny about it, there's no chemistry to be had with Tanjiro or Inosuke getting annoyed at all this, and anything he gets with them outside of what I just established is plain. Dry even. He has barely any rapport with anyone. So if his constant screaming and crying isn't funny to you, there's just about nothing there. Inosuke is the funny boarhead man who always wants to rush in and take the most violent option, and each arc gives him a weird new gimmick on top of him just constantly forgetting Tanjiro's name. One arc he's feeling all nice and fuzzy thanks to an old lady letting everyone stand an inn. Another sees him arrogantly asserting himself as the leader for a bit. Thankfully, his stubborn pridefulness does bounce off Tanjiro a bit, as he serves as a straight man to the boar's, well, boorishness. However, he can't carry the cast dynamics by himself, especially when he only has a moderately strong dynamic with Tanjiro. There's a moment at the end of Mugen Train where Rengoku, the fire Hashira everyone liked, dies, and both Tanjiro and Inosuke are heartbroken about this. The latter even tries to get Tanjiro to stop crying and instead tearfully urges him to keep going after Rengoku places his faith in him. It's a scene that shows both of them commiserating at their lowest, and then we never follow up on that. It never informs Inosuke's character, or his interactions with Tanjirou in any way. Only Tanjirou gets to keep the weight he felt from this tragedy. He is the only one of the main cast with any notable development for the rest of the series outside of the terrible flashback attempt for Zenitsu and his self-loathing back in Season 1. That came completely out of nowhere. And I don't understand why, especially when the pacing of the very next arc drags to a crawl. Not only does that Zenitsu example come out of nowhere, it results in a rehash of his very first pop-off moment under the pretense of learning a totally new technique that is literally no different from what he executed before. After a while, each arc focuses on a designated Hashira instead of these two, to the point where in the arc after I dropped the show, they're tagged out entirely and only get their Battle Shonen mandated backstory encounter in the final arc. With a cast this limited in their potential, it's no wonder I struggle to get attached to them, Tanjirou included. Even Inosuke can only do so much when the show limits what they can even do to interact outside of changing his gimmick every now and then. Tanjiro is just okay when he could have been so much more. Now let's look at Hajime no Ippo, one of the most electrifying shonen I have ever experienced. Let's do the first 45 episodes, since I'm mainly going off the first 44 for Kimetsu no Yaiba. Ippo Makunouchi is a hard-working, tenacious, generous mama's boy and bully victim who develops a talent and passion for the art of boxing. He's kind, compassionate, and empathetic to the point where, combined with his sheer tenacity and strength, he inspires friends, gym mates, and rivals alike. Aside from being a total dork, one of the biggest factors for why I love him so much, while being ambivalent towards Tanjiro, is his chemistry with the people around him. Through the everyday interactions with his mom, we get to experience their relationship beyond just the dire moments and establishing beats. Little moments and gestures that show genuine warmth beyond one's duty to one another. Ippo's mom is supportive of him as a single mother running a fishing shop, even if she refuses to go to his fights because she can't bear the thought of seeing him get hurt. We get to see how proud she is of her son as he becomes dedicated to the sport and even stops showing signs of being bullied at school. Ippo is similarly loyal to her, remorseful about pursuing his dream if it means no longer helping her out in the mornings since, due to his dad's death ages ago, he's been the only man in the house. The aforementioned little moments give backbone to what's been established before we get into any dire situations. Stuff like episode 42, where Ippo considers quitting boxing altogether to fill in for his mom when she gets injured before his former head bully, who slowly grew to admire Ippo as a boxer, busts his ass to fill in for him instead. A story like that would not have nearly as much weight without the show reinforcing the foundations that episode 1 established. Then there's his most prominent gym mates, Aoki, Kimura, and fucking Takamura. These guys are a bunch of fucking assholes, both to each other and to Ippo. Takamura hazes everyone. Aside from the coach, no one is safe. Kimura's the middle of the pack, able to lord over Aoki and Ippo, but he's still a target for Takamura. Aoki's only above Ippo, but he gets bullied almost as much as the kid himself, sometimes even catching accidental strays from Ippo thanks to the others instigating shit. Of course, we get to see other sides to all of them as well. Aoki works at a ramen shop to provide for his family, letting the others come before important matches like Ippo's first tournament. Takamura gets Ippo away from his school bullies and imparts his sheer dedication onto him to the point where Ippo can't help but admire him in spite of everything. Ippo even gets to see him suffer the agony of cutting weight before a fight with how painful hunger gets at that point in the middle of the night, which challenges one of Ippo's notions. Kimura? Okay, we don't get that from him until way later, but still. These three and Ippo bounce off each other frequently, and he gets to see admirable sides to all of them, outside of just them being capable fighters. It also helps that while some of the hazing can go quite far, the others constantly eat shit anyways. Bad luck strikes them all, sometimes Ippo works with the others to stick it to Takamura, and eventually Ippo's talent and accolades move him above Aoki and in some ways Kimura on the totem pole. The dynamics shift and evolve over the course of these first 45 episodes, let alone the rest of Season 1 and everything afterwards. We see everyone get weirded out by Aoki's taste in women, or disappointed at Takamura's lecherousness and penchant for going overboard in his bullying of Ippo. Everyone laughs at Ippo bowing to the audience after every match, and makes jokes about his giant cock, but we get to thoroughly understand how they care about him all the same. Jagged as these brutes are, they also feel well-rounded, and it becomes satisfying when Ippo starts turning the tides against some of them socially in some instances. And of course, this is before we get into rivals like Miyata and Mashiba. This is also before getting into later relationships like with Kumi in episode 51 onwards, or even Ippo's hard-ass yet faithful coach throughout the series. I haven't even gotten to the mid-season temp rookie Barf Michi, who idolizes Ippo the way Ippo initially and still somewhat does idolize Takamura, which reflects Ippo's journey over the course of the first 35 episodes. Just with some of the primary and preliminary relationships, Ippo's able to bounce off a lot of characters and have strong dynamics with them that get the privilege of meaningfully shifting over time. We even get to see and hear of everyone else's matches. The cast genuinely feels alive, and that's part of why Ippo as a main character is so easy to follow as the purest one among them. Anyways, let's flip the script and focus on cartoons and villains, shall we? Every hero needs a good villain, they say. Yep, we're back to Hazbin Hotel. And anyone who shits on me for dunking on the show again will get the Nut Blaster treatment. Now, I've spoken at length about how terrible its main character is, and how her almost complete lack of agency regarding the development of and interaction with other major characters contributes to her lack of value to the show's premise. I'm not going over all that again, you can watch the last video for that. The show's cast is criminally underdeveloped and underexplored even after 2 seasons in favor of plot shenanigans that only work due to absurd time skips and the main characters being aggressively stupid or incurious. On that note, let's talk about Vox. Vox is a decent villain in Season 2, infinitely better than Adam. He revels in everyone's failure, has fun villain songs, and feels well realized as a manipulative egotist insecure about his capabilities. He's like a cartoon version of Rush Limbaugh, Elon Musk, and Nick Fuentes all rolled up into one, except he's also a hypnotist and a former serial killer. He's a demagogue, a master of spinning narratives, and Alistair is great at pushing his buttons about needing other people for him to get as far as he gets. Al did cruelly reject his partnership after all, and now Vox wants to show all of hell who's boss as he drags heaven down one laser cannon at a time. He's entertaining enough to watch spin everything Charlie, Lucifer, and the angels do against him, while playing up the crowd with his suave demeanor and ostentatious showmanship. The problem is, he isn't threatening. More accurately, the heroes are too fucking stupid for it to feel exciting or shocking when he outwits them and embarrasses them. Sure, in Season 2 Episode 3, everyone knew by the halfway mark that Charlie was making a fool out of herself for him to watch. It's not entirely forgivable since Charlie's beyond stupid, manipulative, and callous even by her standards, in a way that only partially gets called out by the season. However, then we get to Episode 5. Lucifer has just told Charlie's girlfriend that he can't actually harm or kill sinners, but he's urged to try and intimidate Vox anyways. Meanwhile, Charlie asks some of the angels to help her prove Pentious' redemption, while they want to apologize to Hell for the fact that Adam, one of their lead archangels, committed genocide against the citizens of Hell for 7 years. With Sarah's approval, of course, but nobody needs to know that. What you might reasonably expect to happen is something along the lines of, I don't know, let's say Lucifer destroys Vox's big stage, and Vox spins that to make Lucifer look like an angelic bully keeping his citizens down. You'd also expect the angels to announce the end of the exterminations once and for all, while attempting to provide proof of Pentious' redemption that Vox had been demanding, like, I don't know, bringing him down to heaven or using his holograms. Then he'd spin everything around as just them lying and asking for forgiveness because they're scared of what Hell can do now that they killed Adam. Hell, he could even use the fact that Charlie brought the angels with her to the event against her, interacting with the protagonist he's been smearing all season. It would show that even when everyone's trying their best and scaring or convincing some civilians, Vox is such an effective mastermind that he can craft any compelling narrative he wants. It could challenge him in a way that makes the heroes look competent, even effective before Vox turns the tables on him with his quick thinking. Especially since most of the angels don't quite understand the gravity of this whole situation. Part of what makes a good villain threatening is the fact that they know much more about the situation than the heroes at the start after all. What actually happens is that Lucifer just starts flying around and talking shit before Vox egos him into looking like a bitch. What also happens is that the angels show up with gift baskets and apologies without announcing the end of the exterminations or doing anything to provide evidence that Pentious redeemed himself. They don't consider bringing him down to hell since, apparently for some unspecified reason, he can't go down again. They don't even think to use the hologram technology the Hell Embassy Adam utilized has. Charlie doesn't even contribute to the proceedings beyond getting so mad at her dad once his failure is added that she starts flipping sofas and screaming at him while intimidating him. She does more to intimidate him than any of the fucking villains in the show. It takes literally zero effort for Vox to mock everyone and turn the citizens against them. Why should we even expect the heroes to get better so they can thwart Vox in the future? There's nothing shocking or engaging about any of this, and outside of Alistair, anything the heroes do to undermine Vox now won't be believable or satisfying. It won't feel earned. They're just that stupid, and there's nothing they could learn from this situation other than, oh, the angels don't quite know how bad it is down in heaven. When Cornelia trounced Lelouch in Code Geass after he got cocky following 2 easy victories, it was shocking. When he got better equipment and planned things out better to take her by surprise the next 2 times, it was satisfying. Sure, Suzaku bailed her out the first time and robbed Lelouch's forces of their victory because they still didn't have a good counter to him yet, but the second time around, Lelouch took her down and interrogated her, and she's by no means the only example of this in the show. When Vox wins in Hazbin Season 2 Episode 5, it's none of these things. And when he finally gets taken down in the finale, it's also none of these things. Well, mostly. There is one mildly satisfying payoff to Vox's downfall. Alistair allowed himself to get captured by Vox so long as he lets Al's friends go and doesn't lay his hands on Charlie. That way Alistair can bully him into sidelining and alienating his cohorts to prove his power. This is all part of his sorta loose plan to ego Vox into making a mistake at his highest point, where he will, I guess, gloat at Charlie who will somehow be there, and this will both cause him to become the most powerful sinner in hell, thereby breaking Alistair's contract with Rosie about becoming the most powerful sinner in hell, and break Vox's deal so that Alistair can embarrass him at his moment of near victory. It's kinda fun in the moment, but it is convenience heavy. That and when a fully powered Vox fights Alistair who was still handicapped from the events of Endgame Season 1, Alistair does beat him with skill, but they're crashing into each other until Alistair wins before the shark pulls up, so even that doesn't feel tense or satisfying. It certainly doesn't feel like Alistair outskilled him. It feels like kids flung a bunch of action figures at each other until they got bored and moved on to the next set piece. It's still better than Charlie's half, though. Her whole plan was to prove Pentis' redemption at the end of Season 1 to the denizens of Hell, while someone stops Vox's laser piss cannon from blowing heaven. After Vox's cohort Velvet stops the broadcast from happening, and Vox now coaxes Charlie into calling Vox the strongest sinner in hell, Charlie does literally nothing to go against him for the rest of the episode. She doesn't even try to stop him from manually firing his laser at Alistair and wrecking hell. At best, Emily urges her to help her save the civilians. Velvet and Valentino are the ones to stop him because he's just fucking things up too much. Emily is also the one who takes the initiative to stop the laser from overloading while Lucifer is still inside, and that only works because Alistair gets Rosie to restore him to full power, and the other Vs decide they don't want to get blown up. The fucking broadcast only goes through once all threats are removed from the board for an unearned feel-good epilogue, just like I said last time. None of this shit is satisfying, let alone a good downfall for Vox, who doesn't even die, might I add! I also brought up in my previous video how it feels like Hazbin accidentally creates parallels between both Vox's and Charlie's turbulence, manipulativeness, and ego. Charlie is a more naive and good-natured leader who just needs to be riled up a bit to show her worst sides, whereas Vox is a malevolent demagogue in charge of an evil corporation who also only needs to be stirred up a bit to start forsaking everyone. I say accidentally because they don't highlight this at all. This is just another way Charlie's lack of interaction with Vox weakens his role as a villain and potential foil. He works as such for Alistair, since both are clearly harped on for being petulant, arrogant schemers who need people for power in their own ways, with Vox working with people and Alistair using them. There's also the fact that Alistair's beholden to someone, whereas Vox just works with peers. Too bad he can't effectively pull double duty as the villain for the main character he's been capitalizing on from the start. Though even with everything I've just said, keep in mind, he's by far the better of the two villains. both in regards to Season 2 with how wasted Lute is despite her build-up in Episode 2, and in comparison to Season 1's main villain, Adam. But we're not really going to delve into that one note, barely present loser. Though the bar for this show is south of heaven in general. Now let's look at another show with main villains that shift every season. Teen Titans, specifically the first season to keep it fair. 13 episodes versus 16, or I guess 13 versus the 8 that make up Hazbin Season 2, though only 3 episodes really matter for both shows here. I choose Season 1 over Season 2 because Slade feels more similar to Vox than Terra does, let's be real. I'm gonna be upfront before I gas up Slade here. Vox is a much more entertaining villain. Slade's plans often feel as nebulous as Alistair's outside of his general desire for a successor. However, he serves as a successfully intimidating figure, an obstacle to mirror, pressure, and develop Robin. He's effective for the purpose he's built for, is what I'm saying. After a while, it turns out that he's been testing Robin on and off, gauging to see if he's skilled enough to turn into a successor. Robin's primary obsession is stopping Slade, not just the schemes he's connected to, but the man himself once he figures out who and where he is. And Slade knows this. Like with Charlie and Hazbin, this obsession being preyed upon is turning him against his friends to some respect, as he endangers them and ignores their input. Incidentally, a new villain shows up, an upstart called Red X, and he wants to work with Slade. He utterly embarrasses the rest of the Teen Titans, twice, except for Robin, who's conspicuously absent both times. Yeah, we know it's him, and the show doesn't waste much time before making that reveal. He's been battling them and committing robberies on nebulous, ultimately meaningless computer chips to court Slade's favor for the sake of infiltration. Slade led him on before immediately calling him out during their face-to-face meeting, and yoinking the chips Robin stole. Red X is just as impatient as Robin, just as skilled as Robin, and he only showed up after Slade sent Robin a video message. It wasn't hard to make the connection. Even Starfire figures it out when stumbling onto the convincing hologram Robin used during the second encounter to fool the Titans. To make matters worse, the rest of the Titans blow the operation right after Slade was about to sick his bots on Robin, allowing Slade to get away since they're focused on Red X. He then has to out himself to them, and after confronting Slade one-on-one, barely keeps up before learning that it was just another Slade bot, just this time resembling the real thing. Slade's been drilling the idea of the fragility of trust into Robin's head, and with this crucial failure, Boy Blunder over here gets to experience his whole squad losing faith in him. Apart from Starfire, they were already growing irate with his convenient absences when Red X was whooping everyone's asses. And by the end, Starfire's delivering the "bro, you're just like Slade, you don't even trust us" truth nuke. It's a bit contrived that none of them even tried to stop Slade, when really only Cyborg trapped Red X. Immediately, I might add. Raven and Beast Boy were dealing with the bots, but that still leaves Starfire, who showed up late to tell everyone that it was Robin. But like, I guess we needed the one-on-one that badly. And Robin does play his cards the best he could, with the logic of, if they knew it was me, they would have held back and it wouldn't have been convincing. He just didn't see how suspicious the timing and similarities were, due to his obsession. Though the episode really wants to make sure the audience does. Hell, the two-parter endgame for the season also lays it on aggressively thick. Yes, it's a kid's show, but tone it down a bit. The first episode in the two-parter sees Slade tricking the Titans into going on a wild goose chase, setting up Cinderblock to ambush and separate Robin so that he could fight Slade, well, another robot replica of him. The time bomb they were all tracking was not only not at the film location, but it turns out to be a decoy to get his friends injected with nanomachines. Either Robin joins Slade and cuts off contact with the Titans, or they die, and Robin concedes. Next thing we know, he is robbing gadgets for Slade and fighting the Titans again. Anytime he disobeys, Slade hits his friends with the nanomachine special until Robin either capitulates or gets them killed. Of course, Robin makes it clear that he'll fight and betray Slade first chance he gets, and that chance comes when he gets back from his second assignment, leading to a topsy-turvy kind of fight where one side largely takes a beating before the other does, and then Slade just shuts down Robin because fuck you. Even when his friends work out what truly happened and fight to get him out, he's left to contend with the fact that he may indeed be like Slade, not that the show will let anyone forget. It may feel a tad rushed, but at the same time, it is satisfying when Robin figures out the source of the nanomachine problem and injects himself to make an ultimatum with Slade. Let them all go, or let the only promising apprentice candidate die. Only then does he, along with the rest of the Titans, whoop Slade's ass. It's a clever and satisfying way for Robin to turn the tables on someone who's just that extra bit more skilled, powerful, and ruthless. Robin is observant and capable after all. How else would he be able to exploit all his friends' weaknesses throughout his fights with them? Like Vox, Slade lives to fight another day, but it's interesting how despite me considering both villains fine, one is more entertaining as a character, while the other is more effective as an antagonist. There's plenty of ways to approach this video's topic. I could talk about how different characters in Gurren Lagann develop in different arcs of the show, while having a ton of chemistry and moments for even tertiary characters to get their due. I could talk about how Puss in Boots: The Last Wish juggles 3 different antagonistic factions, each with drastically varying purposes while making them all compelling for our heroes to face, and giving each of the heroes arcs of their own, 2 of whom also put pressure on Puss like the antagonists do. I could also talk about how a major criticism of John from RWBY, and again, Alistair from Hazbin, is how they often get agency and focus at the expense of our main characters, even in moments that ought to prioritize them. Alistair kinda got this in Season 2, though it was even worse in Season 1. However, I decided to go with 2 different anime that I felt could tie everything I talked about in this video together. But since one of them has a fully written out video script for the future, I guess I'll talk about the other, and why you absolutely need to watch it. SSSS.Dynazenon is a great show, both as a follow-up to SSSS Gridman, and as a mecha tokusatsu with an ensemble cast. It's a show about 5 people overcoming their traumas and hang-ups through intertwining arcs as they fight a bunch of guys using kaijus to destroy humanity. Let's talk about the kaiju eugenicists first. As a collective, they're a fun bunch that's partially carried by their chemistry, since only half of them have much going on. When they're not ravaging the city, they're just dicking around and having some fun banter while bowling or relaxing at a water park's onsen. There's the brazen loser Onija, the soft-spoken Juga, and the 2 more interesting characters, Mujina and Shizumu. Mujina is generally listless, largely going with what the others are up to, even if she becomes more emotive and dynamic, even resentful as the series progresses. Much like her more heroic foil, the loser neat Koyomi, it gives her something to do. But after they fail to really connect and Koyomi manages to find a greater purposes while Mujina can't, she becomes hateful towards him. Then there's Shizumu, the aloof leader who doesn't really partake in everyone else's fun beyond just watching them. He finds emotions interesting since they fuel the kaiju he and his folks control, but he also finds them limiting, a fascinating prison of the mind, which is what draws him to observe the budding relationship between 2 of our main leads, Yume and Yomogi. What started off as a detached Yume standing up Yomogi due to her habit of breaking promises, like what happened to her thanks to the death of her sister before an important recital, develops into an endearing friendship and relationship. Their banter softens, like when Yume delivers goods to a sick Yomogi, and then immediately comes back to remind him to eat after she leaves. Or when they're chilling at the water park and she's eating churros. Sure, they quickly become part of the Dynazenon crew fighting the eugenicists, and Yomogi opts to help her learn why her sister died before she could fulfill the promise years ago. But again, it's the moments between all that solidify the bond, like when Yume lightly pokes him before thanking him for saving everyone in episode 8, and then asking him to eat out somewhere with her. It's moments like these that make it believable and even hard-hitting when Yomogi cries in Yume's stead after hearing how distant she and her sister became before she died, feeling her importance and loss in Yume's life before the 2 joke about his face soon after. Or when he puts everything on the line to save her in episodes 9 and 10. Yomogi already has good chemistry with characters like the brash yet principled Gamma, like when the former saves the latter from starvation, and when Gamma barges into his bath to ask him why he didn't go train. Gamma himself admonishes Yume for breaking his promise sometime after chiding Yomogi for letting himself be used like that, and later on he relates to Koyomi living a life by his own feelings regarding a woman from the past he feels tethered to. Hell, just look at their relaxed seating positions during that conversation. They and everyone else feel natural. Yet, in spite of how low-key Yomogi's relationship with Yume is, it is the strongest bond in the show. Shizumu sees bonds as society's chains, binding them away from freedom, but that draws his attention all the same, even if he'd never truly understand its value beyond it being fuel for kaijus. He's certainly a more low-key villain than the others I talked about, and his purpose is a bit different than theirs, but he's an effective foil for Yomogi all the same. Like with Ippo, I'm glossing over a lot to avoid spoilers, since I think this is a gem you absolutely need to watch. There's a ton of intricate character work regarding the intertwining arcs of Yume, Yomogi, Koyomi, and even Chise, which culminate in a show-stopping final quarter, especially episode 10. The way Yomogi recognizes how small his hangups are compared to his peers, allowing him to help them get through theirs after recognizing the call to action. The way Chise is the odd one out, both in her school life and in the standing of the Dynazenon crew, and lack of a proper eugenesis foil before figuring herself out in time to help Yume. The way Yume's desperation regarding her sister becomes more energized as the season continues, until eventually reaching a low point before everything comes together for her with Yomogi's help. The fact that several of these characters have their own engaging dynamics, like between Koyomi and his cousin Chise, and the stuff between the other three, just adds further weight to their arcs. It genuinely feels like they became friends by episode 5, when they're hanging out at the water park, let alone by the time their arcs all come to a head and some of them have to say goodbye. No one is an island in this show, just as characters and people aren't islands in general. I genuinely think that if this show had caught on in the West, we'd have at least a few character analyses and think piece videos the way we do for shows like The Amazing Digital Circus. Even within the framework of this show, I can't do it justice without delving into major spoilers. I don't care if you watch Gridman first or jump straight into this with none of that show's context, just watch it when you can. That and the crossover sequel to both, Gridman Universe. After that, go make an anime podcast where you can talk about it 5 times. Or just go watch ours where we do exactly that. Anyways, let me know some of your favorite examples of main characters with great chemistry with the rest of their cast. Or terrible examples if you want. Same for villains strengthened or weakened as antagonists by how the heroes oppose them. What else comes to mind when you hear the phrase, characters don't exist in a vacuum? I've said all I care to at this point, so the rest is up to you in the comments below. Till next time. Wait, shit, I could have talked about Doctor Who!